I recently felt the desire to watch all of Tarkovsky's 7 works, both spurred on by my adoration of his works thus far, and for the desire to see the films that had slipped by me. During this marathon of Tarkovsky, I felt a deep sense of connection running through all of his work. I even thought about doing a video discussing all of his works, but felt like it might be a little bit too ambitious to start. So instead, I decided to settle on one of my favorites of his works, and one that, even in the midst of watching all of them, stood out even more. His dreamlike autobiography, and the climax to his filmography, in my opinion, Mirror. As we first dive into the work of Tarkovsky, story structure, pace, and style will immediately come to first-time viewers' minds. Tarkovsky's work is very deliberate in its pace and tone. He also has his visual cues that he uses quite often that stem mainly from the elements like fire and rain, but the image of floating is also quite often used in his work. The filmmaker himself said, "The purpose of film is to break with narrative norms, to capture the passage of time, and elicit a strong emotional response in the audience." So with this understanding of his philosophy and his approach to filmmaking, we should understand that the narrative is not straightforward in this film, or any of his films for that matter. It's better to think of his films as poems, which leads to his films garnering very different interpretations. Mirror is no different, as we start in what is one of my favorite opening scenes, that works as a thesis statement to his entire work, as the son of the narrator turns on a television screen presenting a video of hypnosis of a boy with a stutter. As we watch, he is cured of his stutter through some works of trickery and what could be classified as faith exercises that you might use to check your reflexes or use in team activities. Then suddenly we cut to the opening title, a shocking opener that may leave some scratching their heads, but I see this as Tarkovsky boldly claiming that he hopes to use the screen, or in this film's case, a mirror, to basically hypnotize his audience to come to some greater understanding of their own lives and others. Many may interpret this differently, and I highly recommend others to try and decipher the code of this opening. After this intro, we slowly fade into the gorgeous scenery of the Russian countryside, as his mother sits on a fence, watching the wind bring in an outsider. This brings us to what I see as the second foundation of this work, and that is the relationship between a mother and her son, a theme that runs through the film and bookends it in a way. The relationship seems to distort time in his view of past and present. This line is even blurred more as the same actress who plays the mother in some scenes is also the narrator's ex-wife. This connection is even spoken aloud as the narrator speaks to his ex-wife, as they discuss their own child.
Нет, а мы с ней действительно очень похожи.
Tarkovsky, clearly pulling from his own childhood, uses this as a way to enter this relationship, the distance we find with our parents, and the will it takes to maintain connection. He also sees his mother as this monolithic figure in his life, due to the clear absence visually of his father, which mirrored his own life, as his father fought in World War II and eventually left the family entirely. But his presence is still felt strongly in the film, through the poems that his real-life father reads over the film.
Каждое мгновенье мы праздновали, как богоявленье, одни на целом свете. Ты была смелей и легче птичьего крыла, по лестнице, как головокруженье, через ступень сбегала и вела сквозь влажную сирень в свои владенья с той стороны зеркального стекла.
Giving his parents a place in the film, both represented in their own unique ways, through sound and visuals. This just begins to break the surface as we look into the relationship with his ex-wife and their own son. We start to see repetitive patterns in the dynamics and relationships. The son he has with his ex-wife mirrors his own childhood in a way, as he doesn't fit in. For his childhood in military school, he clearly does not succeed. In the present time, the son is unable to achieve great things academically. We also see footage of war that he lived through, and its somber tone rings out in its patience. We get some old footage of a very famous moment in Russian history where a massacre takes place between Maoist and the Russian army. And I don't quite know every detail of that moment, but I think it just adds another layer to this ever-shifting film. As we journey in the dreamlike world of his childhood, we are met with gorgeous visuals and connective tissue to all of his works before and after this, whether it is fire or rain or honestly just all of the elements. We also see the important visual cue of a dove, which brings biblical allegories of the spirit in Christianity, which Tarkovsky is a believer in. I don't see this as a direct interpretation, but a fascinating one none the least, especially as we enter the final chapter of this film. After being overwhelmed by all these themes along with the stunning and patient imagery, we enter the final minutes of the film, where I feel the movie becomes truly transcendent. We learn that the whole film is the narrator thinking or dreaming about his life that he has lived from his deathbed, from which he releases the aforementioned dove or his spirit. Then we are shown what could be seen as a recreation of Dante's Divine Comedy, as he walks with his mother and sibling across the fields, carried by a completely powerful score, only to see that his mother and father are laying in a field together, dreaming of the child they will have. It is easily one of the most moving and powerful moments in all of film, and always gets such a strong emotional reaction from me. For how complex this film is, it surprisingly is only 109 minutes. I truly see this as Tarkovsky's masterwork, for how he succeeds in fitting so much information just using visual language, but also how it connects to me emotionally. I feel like in many ways I've only scratched the surface of this film, but trying to explain this or give it some overarching singular theme would be a complete disservice to the film and the work of art that it is. This is a film that I highly recommend to anyone, even though it may seem a little distant at first or patience testing. I think it's easily one of the greatest films of all time, and it's constantly in my top 10. This is an easy 5 stars, and I highly recommend this. If you watch Mirror and you're looking for something like it, these are 4 films that I would recommend to you. So to start, I'm actually going to give you kind of 2 pathways, both Tarkovsky films. So if you liked Mirror and you're looking to get into more Tarkovsky, there's many different ways you can start. You can start at the beginning, or you can take kind of what I'm going to give you, which is 2 paths that I think are pretty distinct. If you're very interested in the person of Tarkovsky and almost like continuing the story of Mirror, I would highly recommend his first film made outside of Russia, and that is Nostalgia. In many ways, it's almost like Mirror Part 2, as he is able to navigate what he's going through in his own life, particularly his exile from Russia. It's a very fascinating film, but it's also in the same way as Mirror, it's very focused on past, present, and connections between time and space and people. And if you're looking for something a little different, I would highly recommend probably his most renowned film, and that is Stalker. It is his science fiction epic. It has some of the most stunning visuals you will ever see, and it is a really profound film that uses the very striking imagery to tell a very unique story. It's very fascinating. I love it very much. And outside of Tarkovsky, there are 2 other films that I want to talk about, and one is Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. Much like Tarkovsky, he works in a lot of naturalistic styles of filmmaking. He rejects the cold visuals of someone like, Stanley Kubrick. They're almost on like opposite ends of the spectrum in the way they like to frame their story, use cinema. And I think you could really link Mallick to Tarkovsky in the way that he films nature and human connection. You should definitely check out Days of Heaven. And number 3 is a new film that some might see as like a surprising connection, but I really think that The Fabelmans is a great film. Steven Spielberg's film that came out last year. And I see a lot of connection in the way that we connect to art, our family members, the way our family members have an impact on our own lives, the connections with them and how they can like sever. It's a very great film. I highly recommend The Fabelmans if you haven't seen it. Thanks everyone for watching, and if you want to join this community of film lovers, give this a like and subscribe. I recently reviewed the new Guardians of the Galaxy film, which is completely different from Mirror, but if you want to check that one out, it's right here. Also, I recently reviewed Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid. Definitely check those out, and I hope you all have a great day.